foreign buyers here in BC been effective? And what are the unintended consequences and benefits of that ban we're seeing so far? Well, let's jump into it. So here we have this letter published by 12 of the most prominent developers in British Columbia. Beatty, Polygon, Cressy, you name it, they're here. And this was penned to key figures provincially and federally related to housing. We got Prime Minister Mark Carney, Federal Housing Minister Gregor Robertson, David Eby, the list goes on. And in the letter, the group says, the current policy is unintentionally stalling new construction and putting jobs at risk and deepening the province's housing affordability crisis. But how can a measure aimed at helping Canadians actually be deepening the housing affordability crisis? Well, further in the letter, they go on to say that while we understand the ban was implemented to protect housing supply for Canadians, it has unfortunately impacted the construction of new homes and as an unintended consequence. The letter explains that developers cite hard numbers surrounding the struggles in the real estate industry. Housing construction declined by 50% from March 2024, from just under 5,000 homes to just under 2,500 homes in March 2025. And this is all happening while the CMHC also published this article in June saying that we need to double the pace of construction over the next decade in order to restore housing affordability to 2019 levels. There's a bunch of information here, but we're just going to go to the more localized stuff here. So in Vancouver, it's estimated that an additional 7,200 homes are needed annually above the business as usual scenario, so an increase of 29%. But at the same time, we've actually seen our construction starts drop 50%. So why aren't developers building more projects? Well, you may or may not know, but in order for a developer to secure financing to build those townhouses or their low rise or that high rise, they essentially need to show a proof of concept. They need to sell about 60 to 70% of those homes before they'll get the money to build those homes. And generally, the people that are buying into pre-sale are locals and foreign capital. And here in BC, the foreign buyer has been a boogeyman terrorizing the dreams of potential homeowners for, let's call it, a decade. But if you actually do look at the numbers, they do make up a relatively small number of total transactions. And generally, it's just related to a few sections in the market. But let us continue. While there have been fewer housing startups over the last couple of years, what they are building is purpose-built rentals. And that is a good thing. It's needed for the growing population here. And let's talk a little bit about that. Why are developers building these purpose-built rentals? Well, the easiest answer is it's easier for them. There are government incentives, and ultimately it's kind of the safer thing for them to do right now. Plus, they don't need to sell 60 or 70% of them in order to secure the financing to get them built. And traditionally, we see around 27% of housing startups as purpose-built rentals. Last year, it was 37%, which was a 20-year high. And if we look here, this year is slated to be 42% of these housing startups are going to be purpose-built rentals at a time when we are seeing 50% fewer housing startups. So let's talk about some of the benefits that we've seen. We've obviously seen a softening in the market, and depending on where you are, that's either a good or a bad thing. For buyers out there, they've been rather pleased, especially in the last couple of years. They've been able to get out there, have an abundance of choices, and ultimately find themselves a pretty good deal some of the time. It's also nice to know that they're not having to compete. But even when the market was super busy, generally when you were competing, it wasn't against a foreign buyer, it was against other local buyers. It's also politically popular and easier to sell. when the government comes and does something like this, there's a lot of people out there who will say something like, it's great that the government's finally doing something to help me. And that's fantastic. And they are doing something. However, it's not really getting to the root of the problem. And it's just kind of kicking the can down the road. And it's a lot easier to sell that idea than it is to say, we deeply need to reform our rezoning processes and approval processes to make it easier for developers to build more homes for people. So that also begs these two questions now, which I'll leave you with, is what happens when you tell millions upon millions of foreign capital investment that their money is no longer welcome here? What happens to that market? And the other question is, did the foreign ban really fix housing affordability, or did it just kick a problem that was here today just further down the road? Kind of like, let's say you have a wound that needs stitches, and instead of getting the stitches, you just put a Band-Aid on it. The Band-Aid's going to help for now, but it's not a tenable long-term solution. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Did I touch on some actual points here, or am I, secretly a foreign buyer's agent here to subvert the masses? I'm not. But honestly, I'd love to hear what you guys think. Was I just spouting fluff, or do you think I